I'll balance the French with English. We obviously focused very much today in a meeting that was not an easy one on the refugee crisis. And here, let me say that we also have to start using the right words. It is partially a migrant flow, but it is mainly a refugee flow, which puts us in a different situation when it comes to our legal and moral duties, as Jean very well remembered. And with in our eyes the pictures of the millions of people marching from Budapest to Vienna with European flags. And let me start by saying that I was in contact this morning with Chancellor Faymann for thanking him what he is been arranging at the border, and to show him all our support and solidarity. It is becoming every day clearer to all of us that this is not something that is affecting or is going to affect one or the other member state, but all of us. A few months ago, this was an issue only Italy or Malta or Spain or Greece were raising. Today, it's mainly focused on, when you talk to member states, Greece, Hungary, Austria, Germany, could turn to other member states in the future. And I hope finally, we all realize that these people are coming to Europe. They're not coming to one or the other member states. They're coming to Europe. And it took us collectively, unfortunately, some months to realize that. But maybe that awareness is there finally. And let me say that I believe it was very important today to discuss this issue with the candidate countries. That, by the way, are also those of the Western Balkan route, because this is an issue that concerns not only all the European Union member states, but concerns Europe as a whole, as a continent. It is a regional crisis. It is not only a European crisis, it's a regional crisis. It is also a global crisis. That's why we discuss on a daily basis, I discuss on a daily basis with the UN and the UN system, starting from the UNHCR, but talking about that with the candidate countries, which are on our same boat in dealing with this crisis and with these flows. Reminded us that we have to strengthen even more our cooperation and work together without any kind of blame game among us Europeans, being member states, being candidate countries, being institutions. We are all facing a dramatic event. I don't say an emergency event, because this is here to stay. This is not an emergency, it's an urgency we are facing, but it is not something that starts that day and finishes that day. It is here to stay, and the sooner we accept it psychologically and politically, the sooner we will be able to respond in an effective way and to manage in an effective way. So the time for blame games is over. It's time for taking decisions, turning decisions into actions, and doing it united as Europeans. Only in this way we will have the possibilities to face this issue, this urgency, this dramatic event, keeping faith to our European values, that are the values of respect of human rights, solidarity. And it was important to discuss it with candidate countries also because out of history, when it comes to the Balkans, or out of geography, when it comes to Turkey, they know very well what we're talking about. And I think that in these dramatic days and weeks, we Europeans have to keep in mind the history of our continent. We know what it is, war, conflict, and facing a situation that forces to flee. And as Jean was mentioning, we're talking here of a flow of people that in these weeks can change, but in these weeks is represented mainly by Syrians, Afghans, Eritreans, and Iraqis. So we're not talking about a migration, an economic migration flow. In majority, we're talking about refugees towards which we have a moral and a legal duty. Now we agreed to strengthen our cooperation, not only within the European Union, but also with the candidate countries, on 5 different levels, with very concrete actions. Some of them have started already, some of them are going to be further defined in the next steps that Jean mentioned in the coming days and weeks. And in particular, with the package that the Commission is going to adopt in this coming week, with the decisions that the Ministers of Interior and Justice will be called to take in 1 week, 10 days from now, with then our next steps as foreign ministers. We will have a Foreign Affairs Council, we will have a European Council, for the moment planned for October, but obviously we stand ready to have emergency meetings at any time, and I was the one suggesting and proposing in the beginning of the perception of this acute crisis in March to have exactly here in Luxembourg, if I remember well, a joint meeting. Today we took our discussions and decisions as foreign ministers. It might come a time when we need to come together again with the interior ministers. The important thing is that we have to take into consideration the fact that the external side of our action makes it possible to look for solutions, real ones, to this refugee crisis, but the internal decisions, the internal policies that the European Union takes or doesn't take reinforces or weakens our credibility also in our external action. So the link is there on many different levels. So I was saying, we discussed and we agreed to strengthen cooperation on 5 different elements. First of all, how to better ensure protection to those in need of international protection, asylum seekers that are entitled to the status of refugees. Second, manage borders in full respect of our values. First of all, respect of human rights. Third, the fight against smugglers and traffickers' networks. This is something on which, as you know, we have been working a lot when it comes to the Mediterranean route. We launched an operation in the Mediterranean to fight the traffickers and smugglers at sea. As I did with the defense ministers the day before yesterday, again today I shared with the foreign ministers my suggestion to transit to phase 2 of this operation, which would allow us to operate in ICs, to fight the traffickers and the smugglers at sea. And I have found a large consensus about that need on the naval operation. Obviously, we will need to also increase the level of our action against the traffickers' organizations at land when it comes to the Western Balkan route. Fourth, to strengthen our partnership with third countries, mainly countries of origin and transit. Here, obviously, we're working on the readmission and return agreements, but not only, because we know very well that it is very important for our partners, especially in Africa or in the Middle East, to work together with us on economic development, opportunities for growth and jobs for especially their young people. And I've started to work in this direction in very concrete ways when I met the foreign ministers of the Sahel G5 countries, and I'm planning a visit to Niger very soon in the coming weeks to work with them in this direction. As you know, Niger is one of the main transit countries on the Mediterranean route. And we have also shared with the ministers the proposal to establish a trust fund for Africa. Fifth point, that is maybe the most important, even if it's the most long-term plan, is our common work on what we call the root causes, which in this case has mainly 2 names. One is Libya, when it comes to the southern corridor. And here we have re-expressed all our active support to the last phases of, hopefully last phases, of the negotiations, UN-led negotiations to form a national unity government in Libya. And let me re-stress here again that the European Union, its member states, I would say the whole international community, but here we can speak for ourselves, is ready to support in all possible ways from day one a new government of national unity in Libya to manage all the difficult challenges it will have in front of itself. And Syria. This is why the other issues we had on the agenda today and yesterday are not less relevant than this one, also because we have to connect the dots. Talking about the follow-up of the Iranian deal or talking about the Middle East peace process is not detached in the medium and long run to the issue, so difficult issue we've been discussing, of the refugee crisis. The reason why we are facing this major crisis now that has different features than the ones we have known in the past years is exactly because the conflicts around us have multiplied, and in particular when it comes to the conflict in Syria, we have to intensify our work, and we're ready to do it as European Union, to find a political solution to the conflict, and hopefully the deal we had with Iran on their nuclear program last July could also open the way for a different kind of regional framework that could facilitate steps for reaching a solution to the Syrian conflict. Let me spend a couple of words on the other 2 points we had on the agenda. One always in the Middle East, and again not far away from the issue of migration, because we start to see Palestinians in the flow of refugees, and we know very well that there is a huge Palestinian refugee issue in the region itself. On the Middle East, we had a very long and substantial discussion with the ministers yesterday to prepare our next steps. Yesterday I shared with you, those of you that were here already, that we have worked together with our partners in the Quartet, namely with the UN, with the US, and I was speaking with John Kerry yesterday about this, and with Russia to prepare a new start somehow of the Quartet. We will have a Quartet principles, Quartet Foreign Ministers meeting together with Ban Ki-moon at the margins of the General Assembly later this month, at which will be invited also, have been invited already, the ministers of Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and the Secretary General of the Arab League. This is not irrelevant because we have to build partnerships and a common work in the region, and our region is also the Mediterranean, the Middle East, and making sure that the Middle East peace process engine could be restarted after more than 1 year of stalling is also one way of contributing to a better understanding and a better sense of cooperation between Europe and the Arab world and the Middle East, for sure. So it is not only a matter of justice, it is not only a matter of need for peace and stability and security, because the Middle East conflict, when it comes to Israel and Palestine, is decades long, but there is one additional element recently, which is the presence of Daesh in the region, which should not be underestimated. So it is also our common interest to tackle this issue, even if it is not the top issue on the agenda or a mediatic issue so much. So it is very important. And I'm confident that we could prepare some steps in the coming weeks to restart the engine of this process. Last but not least, yesterday we had a good discussion on our relations with Russia, that when it comes to the issue of migration and refugees, when it comes to the issue of the Middle East peace process, when it comes to the issue of the Iranian deal, is a constructive one. But we should not forget in this framework that our eastern neighbors are still facing very difficult conditions when it comes to their relations with Russia. In some of the cases, first of all, when it comes to Ukraine, we have restated our strong commitment to support the full implementation of the Minsk agreements. Our European Union contribution to that, as you know, is the facilitation of the trilateral talks, especially those on energy and gas, and on the other side on the implementation of the DSFTA. But we also discussed about our relations with our other Eastern partners, in particular focusing on the developments in Belarus, which are obviously very encouraging with the release of the prisoners we have witnessed in the 22nd of August, and the developments we are seeing both in Georgia and Moldova, and also with attention to developments in Azerbaijan and in Armenia. After the Riga summit in particular, we need to strengthen our work and our relation also with our partners in the East. The fact that we have major issue to face to our southern and eastern borders as the refugee crisis and many conflicts should not make us forget that our Eastern partners need support, need partnership, and we continue to work very closely with them on a daily basis. I'll stop here.
Thank you very much.